Imagine it's like 3 a.m. You are lying in a hotel bed, just staring up at an unfamiliar ceiling.
Oh, the absolute worst feeling in the world.
Right. Your brain is just aggressively awake. It's cataloging every single detail of the room, while your internal organs are, absolutely convinced you're in a completely different hemisphere.
Because biologically, you basically are.
Exactly. And then, flash forward maybe 12 hours. It is 3 p.m. You are sitting in this beautiful little cafe in Tokyo, and you have just physically face-planted into a bowl of udon soup.
Yeah, your body just unilaterally decided it was time to shut down.
It is absolute biological chaos,
Yeah.
a complete rebellion of the human nervous system against its environment.
I mean, that's exactly what it is, a total rebellion.
And I think the craziest part is that we pay thousands of dollars for the privilege of experiencing this chaos. We spend months saving up and planning and anticipating this exact scenario, all under the guise of taking a relaxing vacation.
Right, because the reality of travel, the actual physical mechanics of moving a human body across the globe is just profoundly at odds with the fantasy we sell ourselves.
Oh, completely.
We imagine this flawless, frictionless teleportation to a pristine beach, but the actual experience is gritty, it is exhausting, and it requires a massive amount of psychological endurance.
Which is exactly where we are going today. Welcome to this deep dive, everyone. If you are joining us, whether you are aiming for C2 advanced English fluency, or you're preparing to navigate international corporate environments, or maybe you are just insanely curious about the hidden psychology behind the phrases we use every single day, well, you are in the exact right place.
You really are.
Today, we are cracking open a really fascinating collection of advanced English idioms, specifically the vocabulary of travel.
But we aren't just looking at definitions here. I mean, a C2 learner already knows what these words mean on a surface level.
Right, they know the basics.
Yeah, exactly. What we are doing today is decoding the visceral, highly descriptive, and sometimes surprisingly violent language that native speakers use to articulate the realities of exploration. We are really looking at language as a psychological map.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because the context for these phrases is just brilliant. These aren't just, random words pulled from a dictionary. They're often presented to language learners as an escape.
Yes, the ultimate escape.
Right. After spending weeks studying the agonizing vocabulary of office politics and corporate negotiations and personal debt, travel is introduced as the antidote, the ultimate escape hatch from the modern grind.
It functions as this pressure release valve. You reach a breaking point in your daily routine and travel becomes the perceived cure.
Totally.
But what's so fascinating is that the moment you open that escape hatch, the language immediately shifts. It doesn't become soft and relaxing.
No, not at all.
It becomes deeply physical and incredibly intense.
So let's start right there at the genesis of the journey. Before the flights, before the awful hotels, before any of the logistics even happen, let's look at the very first moment that escape hatch cracks open in your mind. The urge to leave. The phrase we use to describe this is getting itchy feet.
Itchy feet. It is such a bizarre yet, universally understood idiom.
It is entirely bizarre. I mean, think about it. You are sitting at your desk, you haven't taken a vacation in 2 years, your boss is driving you crazy, and you turn to your coworker and say, I'm really starting to get itchy feet.
Right, yeah.
Why on earth are we diagnosing a mental state like boredom or stagnation or burnout as a dermatological issue with our lower extremities?
Well, it is a perfect example of embodied cognition in language.
Embodied cognition.
Yeah, the English language has this incredible habit of translating purely psychological distress into localized physical sensations. Your mind feels trapped, your routine is stagnant, but instead of saying, I am experiencing a severe lack of novel stimuli.
Which would sound ridiculous at the water cooler.
Exactly. Instead of that, your language bypasses the brain entirely and assigns the urgency to the body parts responsible for locomotion, your feet.
Wow, so it's as if the feet possess their own consciousness.
Pretty much, yeah.
They are physically itching to walk, to run, to step onto a plane. They are demanding action, and the itch is the warning signal.
Yeah.
It is so much more urgent than just wanting a vacation. An itch demands to be scratched.
Precisely. It is an involuntary reflex, and it highlights how deep the instinct to roam actually goes. It's not presented as a logical decision at all. It's a physical compulsion.
You literally can't help it.
Right. You are sitting at a desk, but your biology is telling you that if you don't start moving, you are going to basically crawl out of your skin.
So the itch becomes unbearable. You finally give in. You buy the plane tickets, and now you have to pack. And the language presents us with a really fascinating behavioral divide right at the outset. On one hand, you have the ideal, which is traveling light.
Ah, traveling light. The holy grail of modern transit. Traveling light is the philosophy of extreme minimal luggage. Bringing only what you can comfortably carry, perhaps just a single carry-on bag for a weekend trip. The linguistic emphasis here is on the word light, meaning unburdened, agile, and mobile.
And the implication is that if you travel light, you can breeze through the chaotic airport, you can weave through the crowded train station, and you are generally just a superior, highly evolved traveler. But here's where it gets really interesting, and I have to push back on this a little bit.
Oh, you don't buy into the superiority of traveling light?
I mean, I think it's a bit of a myth, or at least it's only half the story, because on the other side of the spectrum, you have the overpacker.
We all know one.
Oh, we've all been one. The person dragging 3 massive heavy suitcases for a 5-day trip, packed for every conceivable weather scenario from a blizzard to a heat wave. We tend to mock these people.
We definitely do.
But when I look at the overpacker, I don't see someone who is just bad at organizing. I see a turtle.
A turtle. Okay, explain the mechanics of that analogy.
Well, think about what a turtle does. It carries its entire protective environment on its back. I think lugging 3 massive suitcases is essentially a psychological defense mechanism.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, because travel is inherently unpredictable. You don't know what the weather will be. You don't know what the food will be like. You don't know if your hotel will have the right kind of soap. Right. So the overpacker attempts to physically carry their entire comfort zone across the ocean. The luggage isn't just clothing. It is domestic armor.
That is a phenomenal interpretation, because it reframes the act of packing from a logistical task into a psychological coping strategy.
Exactly.
When you choose to travel light, you are inherently accepting extreme vulnerability. You are making a conscious pact with the universe that says, I'm leaving my safety net behind. If it rains and I don't have an umbrella, I will simply have to endure it or adapt.
Right. Traveling light is an act of supreme confidence, or, maybe supreme recklessness.
While the overpacker, the turtle, refuses to surrender control, they are terrified of the friction of the unknown, so they bring their domestic sphere with them to insulate themselves against the destination.
Exactly. But whether you are accepting vulnerability with a tiny backpack or dragging your domestic fortress behind you, eventually you have to cross the threshold. You have to initiate the journey. Which brings us to one of the most foundational phrases in the C2 vocabulary, hitting the road.
To hit the road. It is the universal starting gun of transit.
And it has this incredible vehicular flexibility. You might use it literally like you want to beat the morning traffic, so you get in your car and say, let's hit the road.
Sure.
But you can also be standing in your living room, staring at your packed bags, about to call a taxi to go to the airport for a transatlantic flight, and you still say, all right, time to hit the road. There is literally no road involved in the actual journey, but the phrase persists.
Because the phrase is no longer about asphalt or cars. It is about momentum. What is crucial for a language learner to understand here is the violence of the verb hit.
It really is a violent word.
It is. We don't say join the road or embark upon the road or merge with the road. We say hit.
It is a striking force, like an impact.
Exactly. Hitting the road represents a violent rupture between being static and being in motion. You are tearing yourself away from your stagnant environment and actively striking out into the world. It requires a sudden, massive expenditure of energy to break the inertia of staying home.
You are launching yourself out of the escape hatch. But here is the brutal reality check. You've hit the road, your adrenaline is pumping, the anticipation is peaking, and then you immediately crash headfirst into the physical punishment of modern transit.
Yeah, the escape is instantly replaced by biological endurance.
We're transitioning from the psychology of desire to the brutal biology of movement.
Let's look at the sky. Let's look at commercial flying.
Oh, boy.
Because the language we use to describe long-haul flights is entirely stripped of glamour. We aren't talking about soaring among the clouds. We are talking about catching the red eye.
The dreaded red eye. For anyone navigating advanced English in a corporate or travel context, this is a ubiquitous term. It refers to a commercial flight that departs late at night and arrives early the next morning.
And you take it because you want to save a night of hotel costs or you need to maximize your schedule. You leave Los Angeles at 11 p.m., you fly through the night, and you land in New York at 6 a.m. just in time to drag yourself into a morning meeting.
It's awful. But look at the linguistic construction of the phrase. If we dig into the mechanics of this, Red eye is a textbook example of metonymy.
Where we substitute the name of an attribute for the name of the thing meant.
Yes. We don't call it an overnight transit flight.
No, we don't name it by its function or its schedule.
We name a multi-million-dollar piece of aerospace engineering directly after the physical damage it inflicts upon the human body.
That is so incredibly dark when you really stop to think about it.
I mean, it really is. We're literally defining the technology by the biological symptom. It produces a bloodshot, exhausted human eyeball. You spend 6 hours sitting upright in a cramped, pressurized metal tube, breathing recycled air, entirely unable to achieve REM sleep, and you emerge with red eyes. So we just call the plane the red eye.
It is a profoundly hostile phrase. It completely commodifies the traveler. The language acknowledges that the human body is simply a piece of cargo being shipped overnight, and the red eyes are just the expected wear and tear of the shipping process.
It's like a warning label built into the vocabulary. And that physical toll brings us directly to the absolute heavyweight champion of travel vocabulary, an essential C2 noun that completely dominates the experience of crossing the globe: jet lag.
Ah, jet lag. The extreme systemic fatigue and temporal disorientation caused by crossing multiple time zones faster than the human circadian rhythm can adapt.
Which brings us back to that bowl of udon soup in Tokyo. The sheer biological schism of jet lag is staggering. You are physically standing on a street corner in Japan, but biologically your liver, your kidneys, and your brain are wandering around somewhere in Chicago.
You are a ghost haunting 2 time zones simultaneously.
Exactly. The internal clock is entirely divorced from the external environment. And the temporal violence of this is severe. It can easily take 3 full days for the biological rhythms to catch up to the physical location. You are surrendering 72 hours of your life to pure disorientation.
So I have to ask a question here. Let's look at the big picture for a second.
Let's do it.
We started this entire deep dive with the concept of travel as an escape. It is supposed to be the cure for burnout. It is the reward for working hard. But then we look at the reality: bloodshot red eyes, falling asleep face first into soup, losing 3 days of your finite human life to biological confusion.
Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare.
Why do we willingly subject ourselves to this? Why do we pay a premium to wage biological warfare on our own bodies just to make a 9 a.m. meeting in New York, or to spend a week in Tokyo?
You know, it points to a deep contradiction in modern values. The answer really lies in how we prioritize efficiency over harmony. The modern traveler, especially the business traveler or the ambitious tourist, operates under the delusion that time can be conquered.
Conquered, right.
We are willing to completely shatter our biological equilibrium because we value the destination, the objective, or the financial savings more than we value our own immediate physical well-being.
We treat our bodies like heavily depreciating assets. We just push them until the warning lights come on, assuming we can fix them later.
Exactly. And the language doesn't hide this.
Right.
We don't have gentle, poetic words for this phase of transit because the experience is fundamentally aggressive. The language of red eye and jet lag strips away the romance and exposes the physical transaction taking place.
We pay for the distance with our biology.
But eventually, the transaction clears. You drink enough coffee, you force yourself to stay awake until sunset, and the jet lag finally dissipates. Your eyes clear up. You step out of your hotel room, fully rested, ready to finally enjoy the vacation.
Finally.
But the moment you step onto the street, you realize the hazards haven't ended. They have just mutated. You are no longer fighting your biology. You are now fighting the environment.
You are entering the geography of tourism. And that geography is entirely designed to separate you from your money and your authenticity.
Let's talk about navigating the destination, because the vocabulary here is incredibly tactical. And the very first thing you have to learn to identify is the danger zone, the tourist trap.
Such a highly descriptive, almost cynical compound noun. A tourist trap is an establishment like a restaurant, a souvenir shop, maybe a curated attraction that is specifically engineered to attract tourists and exploit their lack of local knowledge by charging exorbitant prices for substandard experiences.
We have all fallen victim to this.
Oh, absolutely.
You are exhausted, you are hungry, and you just want to sit down. You see a cafe directly across the street from the Colosseum or right under the Eiffel Tower. You sit down, you order a pizza, and 20 minutes later, you are handed a $30 bill for a piece of frozen dough with ketchup on it.
And you pay it because you were trapped. What is vital to understand here is the linguistic weight of the word trap. Think about the mechanics of a trap in the natural world. It requires a hunter, it requires bait, and it requires unsuspecting prey.
So by using the phrase tourist trap, the language is explicitly acknowledging a predatory dynamic.
Precisely. The English language is stripping away the facade of hospitality here. It is stating plainly that the tourist is prey.
Wow.
The tourist is vulnerable, geographically ignorant, and highly susceptible to the bait of convenience. The local vendors understand this asymmetry of information, and they build mechanisms to exploit it. The proximity to the monument is the bait. The $30 frozen pizza is the snare.
It is literally economic predation disguised as hospitality. So, if the main squares and the famous monuments are entirely rigged with these traps, how do you survive? Well, the seasoned traveler knows the only way to find something real is to go off the beaten path.
Off the beaten path, or in some variations, off the beaten track. This is the core philosophy of authentic exploration.
I want to really look at the physical imagery of this idiom because it is so incredibly vivid. A beaten path is literal dirt that has been pounded flat by millions and millions of heavy footsteps.
It's relentless traffic.
Right. It is a road created purely by the sheer volume of mass consumption.
The beaten path is safe. It is predictable. It is heavily signposted. It is where you find the English menus and the familiar coffee chains. But because it has been consumed by millions, it has been completely sanitized of any original character or friction.
To step off it means actively leaving the safety of the crowd. It means renting a terrible little manual transmission car in Italy and driving away from Rome into the hills looking for a village whose name you can't even pronounce.
It is the deliberate pursuit of friction in exchange for authenticity.
You know, it makes me think of listening to music, specifically a vinyl record.
A vinyl record. Okay, how does that map onto the geography of tourism?
Okay, visualize the grooves on a vinyl record. The beaten path is like a heavily worn, deep, obvious groove on that record. It is the pop song. It's the track that gets played on the radio 10 times a day. It is incredibly loud. It is impossible to miss. And if you just drop the needle anywhere, you will probably hit it.
Right, the mainstream hit.
Exactly. If you stay in that groove, you experience exactly what every other person experiences. The crowded squares, the overpriced souvenirs, the guided tours. It's a manufactured hit.
But stepping off the beaten path.
Stepping off the path is like lifting the needle out of that heavy groove and carefully placing it on the subtle, hidden acoustic tracks at the very edge of the record, the B-sides. It is quieter, it takes effort to find, and it might sound a little strange at first because it hasn't been overproduced for a mass audience, but it feels deeply, fundamentally real.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The mass market groove versus the acoustic B-side. And when you do lift that needle, when you navigate away from the traps and find that hidden track, you are often rewarded with the next linguistic concept, finding something that is right up my alley.
Right up my alley. This is the moment of absolute perfect resonance between the traveler and the destination.
It means discovering a niche activity, a location, or an experience that aligns flawlessly with your specific idiosyncratic personal tastes, skills, or interests.
If you are an absolute history nerd, the beaten path is going to a crowded museum and looking at a statue behind glass for 3 seconds before being pushed out of the way by a massive tour group.
The worst.
But finding something right up your alley is getting lost down a side street in a foreign city and stumbling into a dusty, functioning 400-year-old library where a local archivist actually lets you read an original manuscript.
Look at the spatial metaphor at play here, too. An alley is, by definition, narrow. It is a secondary, often hidden pathway, distinct from the broad main avenues. When something is up your alley, it implies that this experience wasn't designed for the masses. It was tucked away, waiting in a narrow corridor that only someone with your specific disposition would bother to walk down.
It's the ultimate validation of leaving the beaten path. You didn't just find something authentic, you found something that is authentic to you. But, and there's a massive but, hiding in this acoustic narrow alleyway, the moment you step away from the heavily trodden sanitized path, you strip away all of your protections.
You abandon the infrastructure that was designed to cater to your comfort.
Exactly. You are off the path, you are in the real world, the safety rails are gone, and suddenly you are hit with a tidal wave of culture shock.
Culture shock is one of the most profound, psychologically dense concepts in the travel lexicon. It is imperative that we do not dilute this term.
It's not a joke.
No, it is not merely a mild surprise at encountering a different type of electrical outlet or a strange street sign.
It's not, oh, look, the steering wheel's on the other side of the car.
No, the gravity of the term relies entirely on the word shock. In a medical context, shock is a life-threatening condition where the body experiences a sudden, systemic failure to cope with physical trauma or blood loss. By adopting this medical terminology, the phrase culture shock acknowledges that suddenly stripping away a human being's familiar social cues is a genuinely traumatic cognitive event.
It is a systemic failure of your social navigation systems.
Yeah.
You suddenly don't know how to order food. You don't know how close to stand to someone when you speak to them. You discover that dinner isn't served until 10 p.m. and your body, which is still fighting off jet lag, is screaming for food at 5 p.m.
It's overwhelming.
You try to cross a street and you realize the traffic flows by a set of chaotic, unspoken rules that seem to actively invite death. Your brain simply cannot process the inputs.
You are experiencing intense anxiety, profound disorientation, and often a deep sense of isolation. The linguistic and cultural scaffolding that holds your identity together in your home country has just been completely dismantled.
So here's where it gets really interesting for me. I want to throw a philosophical pushback at you because this seems like a massive paradox.
Okay, let's hear it.
Just a few minutes ago, we were romanticizing the idea of going off the beaten path. We said that avoiding the tourist traps and finding the hidden acoustic tracks was the ultimate goal of travel. But now, we're defining the direct result of that authenticity as a state of medicalized psychological trauma.
Right.
So my question is this. If you go on a trip and you don't experience at least a little bit of anxiety, if you don't feel a mild systemic failure of your social cues, did you actually travel? Or did you just pay thousands of dollars to change your physical scenery while remaining safely sealed inside a protective manufactured bubble?
That is the essential question of modern travel, and I believe the vocabulary we are examining provides the definitive answer. If you completely avoid the shock, you have not truly traveled, you have only relocated.
You just moved your turtle shell to a warmer climate.
Exactly. The friction of the unfamiliars is not a side effect of authentic travel, it is the defining characteristic of it. The trap is designed specifically to insulate you from the shock, for a steep price, of course.
Naturally.
Authentic culture is, by its very nature, disorienting to an outsider. If everything is easy, if everything makes perfect sense, you are likely still on the beaten path, consuming a commodified version of the destination.
The shock is the metric of reality. If you aren't slightly terrified of the traffic, you aren't seeing the real city. But living in a state of cognitive trauma isn't sustainable. You can't just stand on a street corner having a panic attack about the dinner schedule.
No, you have to adapt.
Right. And the English language gives us a prescribed antidote to survive this shock. It offers a golden rule when in Rome.
When in Rome, do as the Romans do. It is an ancient proverb attributed originally to St. Ambrose in the 4th century regarding fasting practices in different cities. Yet it functions continuously and vibrantly in modern C2 English as the ultimate instruction manual for cultural survival.
It is the master key to unlocking a new environment. When you are visiting a foreign place, you observe the customs, traditions, and behaviors of the local people, and you adopt them. You do not demand that the environment bends to your habits. You bend your habits to the environment.
It requires a deliberate, active surrender of your own cultural ego.
That's a great way to phrase it. It's abandoning the ego. If you are invited into a home in Japan and you see slippers by the door, you don't launch into a debate about how wearing shoes indoors is perfectly normal where you come from.
Definitely not.
You don't stubbornly cling to your domestic armor. You simply say, internally, when in Rome, and you take off your shoes.
Or if the host culture expresses hospitality through incredibly spicy, intensely flavored food that you would never typically consume, you suppress your immediate preference, you eat the food, and you express gratitude.
If we connect this back to the psychological trauma of culture shock, when in Rome is really a brilliant coping mechanism.
How so?
Because anxiety comes from resistance. Culture shock is your brain fighting against the new environment, desperately trying to apply the rules of your home country to a place where they just don't work. It is like trying to play chess on a Monopoly board.
That's a vivid image.
When in Rome is the moment you stop fighting the current. You stop trying to play chess, you pick up the dice, and you start swimming with the local tide. By mimicking the behaviors around you, you drastically reduce the cognitive friction.
You transition from being an adversary of the environment to a participant within it. It is adaptability as a survival strategy.
You stop being the turtle. You finally unpack your mental baggage and live in the moment. And as a strategy for a 2-week vacation, it is flawless. You adapt, you learn, you grow, and then crucially, you get to go home. You return to your own beaten path, you sleep in your own bed, and the journey becomes a story you tell.
But that assumes the journey actually ends.
Right. And that brings us to a much darker reality. What happens when the escape hatch doesn't lead back to your living room? What happens when the temporary state of adaptation becomes a permanent, exhausting state of existence?
This brings us to our final section, the severe perils of perpetual motion.
We have looked at the excitement of departure, the biology of transit, and the psychology of arrival. Now we have to look at the phrase that describes the ultimate exhaustion of the traveler. The final C2 idiom is incredibly heavy living out of a suitcase.
This phrase carries a massive psychological weight. It is generally applied to business consultants, touring musicians, traveling salespeople, or digital nomads individuals whose lives require such constant geographic shifting that the very concept of travel completely loses its magic.
We have gone all the way from the thrilling, visceral compulsion of itchy feet to this bleak state of purgatory. Let's unpack the mechanics of this phrase, starting with the literal reality.
Literally, it means exactly what it says. Your entire material existence, your professional attire, your toothbrush, your vital documents, your casual wear, is physically contained within the cubic volume of your luggage.
It's so cramped.
You do not have a closet, you have a zipper.
But the metaphorical meaning is so much darker than just having wrinkled shirts. Metaphorically, living out of a suitcase means you are entirely unmoored from the human experience of nesting.
You are perpetually transient. You never have the temporal stability to actually unpack your bags, to put your clothes in a wooden drawer, to place your toiletries on a bathroom counter, and to settle into a normal, grounded human routine. You are defined entirely by your mobility, which means you belong nowhere.
It completely shatters the perceived glamour of the jet-setting lifestyle. We see people flying, constantly staying in expensive hotels, eating in restaurants every night, and it looks as a luxury. But the language betrays the depressing reality.
It does.
The source material for this vocabulary specifically highlights the complaints of these perpetual travelers. The consultant who just sits in an airport lounge and says, "I am so unbelievably tired of living out of a suitcase. I just want to sleep in my own bed for one continuous week."
Because there is no destination anymore, the objective of travel is to arrive. But when you live out of a suitcase, the arrival is instantly replaced by the preparation for the next departure. The journey itself has become the trap.
You know what it feels like? It feels like playing a massive, exhausting video game.
A video game. Okay, go on.
Yeah. When you're playing a difficult game, you are navigating hazards, fighting enemies, expending resources, and then finally you reach a checkpoint. A save point, a little glowing circle on the ground where you can rest, save your progress, replenish your health, and feel secure that you won't lose your progress.
Oh, I see.
Sleeping in your own bed in your own home is hitting that save point.
A return to baseline.
Exactly. Living out of a suitcase is like constantly pausing the game right before you reach the save point. You can see it, but you never actually step on it. You are constantly in a state of suspended animation, hovering in the menu screens, managing your inventory, but never truly saved. You are never grounded. You just exist in the loading screens between hotel rooms, endlessly waiting for the next level to render.
That is a deeply resonant analogy. You are denied the psychological resolution of arriving. The friction of the road never ceases, and the domestic armor of the overpacker the suitcase becomes your entire universe. It is a profound state of exhaustion.
And I think that exhaustion perfectly completes the arc of the psychological map we've been tracing today.
It really does. We have traveled the full spectrum of the vocabulary.
So what does this all mean? We started by saying we wanted to decode the visceral, highly descriptive language that native English speakers use to articulate the reality of travel.
And if we synthesize what we've uncovered in this deep dive, we see a language that is remarkably honest about the toll of exploration. We started with the physical, localized manifestation of psychological distress, the itchy feet demanding release from the grind.
Yep, the physical urge.
We analyzed the choice between extreme vulnerability and carrying your domestic armor when traveling light.
We felt the violent momentum of hitting the road, only to crash immediately into the brutal, metonemic violence of the red eye and the profound temporal schism of jet lag.
We navigated the economic predation of tourist traps and discovered that the reward for going off the beaten path to find what is right up your alley is the immediate systemic cognitive trauma of culture shock.
We learned the survival strategy of surrendering our cultural ego with when in Rome. And finally, we confronted the bleak, unmoored purgatory of perpetual motion living out of a suitcase.
It is a remarkable linguistic map, not of relaxation, but of endurance.
And now, we want to turn this map over to you, the listener. Because these aren't just phrases to memorize for an exam. They are frameworks for understanding your own life. We want you to actively think about your own stories through the lens of this vocabulary. Where is the most incredible hidden acoustic track you've ever found? Where is your favorite place genuinely off the beaten path?
And more importantly, when did you step off that path and get hit with intense, disorienting culture shock? How did your brain handle the systemic failure of your social cues? Did you adapt and do as the Romans do, or did you retreat back to the beaten path?
Challenge yourself to use these very idioms to frame your own memories, because applying the language is how you truly master it. Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to mull over as we end this journey. We started the hour noting that society views travel as a luxury. It is marketed to us as a flawless postcard, an escape from reality, a frictionless teleportation to a pristine beach.
The dream.
But looking at this vocabulary, a lexicon heavily focused on physical itching, violent hits, bloodshot eyes, bodily lag, predatory traps, systemic shock, and the exhaustion of living in a box, perhaps our language is revealing a secret truth about human nature.
And what truth is that?
That the ultimate, profound value of travel isn't actually the relaxation at all. We don't spend thousands of dollars to be perfectly comfortable. The real value is the friction. It is the discomfort, the extreme disorientation, and the biological chaos that shatters our stagnant routines and forces us to adapt, to change, and to surrender our egos before we finally earn the right to go home and hit the save point in our own beds. It's not about finding a flawless postcard. The value is in surviving the mess.
The language proves that the friction is the destination. A brilliant way to view the journey.
Thank you for joining us for this incredibly extensive deep dive into the hidden psychology of travel vocabulary. We deeply appreciate your curiosity, and we love decoding the invisible mechanics of language with you. Keep exploring, keep questioning your assumptions, and remember that sometimes the most authentic experiences happen the moment the fantasy shatters and you are left dealing with the messy, beautiful reality. We will be waiting for you right here, ready to unpack the next topic on our next deep dive. Take care.
Okay, so I want you to picture this. You are standing right in the middle of a massive, unfamiliar train station.
Somewhere you've never been before.
Exactly. And the departure board above you is just this sea of rapidly changing, totally incomprehensible numbers.
Which is incredibly stressful.
Oh, it's a nightmare. Your phone battery is hovering at a terrifying 2%. Your luggage feels like it has, gained 50 pounds since you left your house.
Right.
And the train that was supposed to seamlessly transport you across the border it no longer exists.
It just vanishes from the board.
Yeah, the panic just starts right in your chest. That glossy, perfectly filtered illusion of travel, the golden sunsets and those effortless cafe moments, it just completely shatters.
It really does.
You are suddenly thrust into the raw, unfiltered reality of international transit. And that's exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks for having me. It's a great topic.
It's so relatable, right? Today, our mission is to decode a really fascinating linguistic source. It's a curriculum on C2 Advanced English Vocabulary.
Which is the highest level of proficiency, yeah.
Right. But we're focusing on a very specific slice of it. We are looking at the highly descriptive, dramatic, and surprisingly historical idioms that native English speakers use when travel goes completely wrong.
The language of absolute chaos, basically.
Yes, because, traveling is so romanticized, but today we are looking at the vocabulary of spontaneity, of disaster, and the sweet relief of actually surviving a trip.
Which, honestly, is when the best stories happen.
For sure. So for you listening, you know that feeling when a trip just spirals out of control. Today, we are giving you the precise, vibrant language to tell those chaotic stories with, native-level flair.
And it's not just about memorizing phrases.
No, not at all. By the end of this deep dive, you won't just understand these idioms, you'll actually see the rich imagery and the history hidden inside them.
Because language is, it's essentially a coping mechanism.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why do our travel disaster stories always make the best stories? Why do we need this vocabulary?
Well, being stranded is a profoundly disorienting state. The human brain is engineered to seek predictability.
We like knowing what happens next.
Exactly. So when you are abruptly stripped of your routine, your geographical anchors, and sometimes even your primary language, the cognitive load becomes immense.
It's exhausting.
It really is. We tend to romanticize the concept of crossing the globe, viewing it as this simple matter of just pointing at a map and moving through space.
Right, like teleporting.
But the sheer mechanics of moving a human body across multiple sovereign borders relying on dozens of interconnected, highly fragile systems. It's a massive logistical tightrope act.
And when that tightrope snaps, we clearly need a way to process the fall.
We do. And that's where the C2 vocabulary comes in. At this tier, you're bypassing literal definitions and absorbing the cultural, historical, and emotional weight of words.
It's how we weaponize language to survive stress.
That's a great way to put it. When you're standing under that canceled departure board, you are fundamentally a victim of a systemic failure. You're displaced, you're vulnerable.
You feel totally powerless.
Right. But by deploying a dramatic, exaggerated idiom to describe your predicament, you engage in a really subtle form of psychological reframing.
Oh, wow. So you're taking back control of the narrative.
Precisely. You take a deeply frustrating, paralyzing event and package it into a structured narrative. The vocabulary of catastrophe allows you to transform yourself from a helpless bystander into the protagonist of an epic, albeit absurd, survival story.
I love that. We use vivid imagery to reclaim our agency from the chaos. And if we really analyze the anatomy of a travel disaster, the collapse rarely begins at the airport or the train station, does it?
No, it almost never does.
It all starts before you even leave the house. It's how you prepare, or crucially, how you fail to prepare.
The preparation phase is where the foundation for the disaster is usually laid.
Yeah. And the source material highlights two extreme behavioral archetypes here. Let's start with the first one. The individual paralyzed by the anxiety of the unknown. The chronic overpacker.
Ah, yes. The traveler attempting to control a chaotic world through sheer material accumulation.
It's so true. And the curriculum highlights a quintessential idiom for this behavior, which is to pack everything but the kitchen sink.
It's a classic phrase.
It is. And the example they use is so painfully accurate. They talk about a traveler packing 4 separate pairs of shoes for a 2-day excursion to the beach.
Which makes zero logical sense.
None. It's a beach trip. Logically, you are going to be barefoot or in sandals for 80% of your waking hours. Packing 4 pairs of shoes for 48 hours isn't preparation. It's an attempt to pack for alternate dimensions.
That's a good way of looking at it.
It's the logistical equivalent of trying to detach your entire apartment, compress it into a rolling suitcase, and drag it across cobblestones.
The cobblestones are always the ultimate test of the overpacker.
Always. But here's where it gets really interesting to me. Why the kitchen sink? Out of all the domestic objects we possess, a sofa, a refrigerator, a televisioner, the English language anchored this idiom to the specific plumbing fixture where we scrub dishes. Why is that?
What's fascinating here is the deliberate invocation of physical and architectural impossibility.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, consider the material reality of a kitchen sink, particularly, back in the mid-20th century when this phrase really gained widespread traction.
Right, they weren't lightweight.
Not at all. You were dealing with hundreds of pounds of cast iron, porcelain, or really thick gauge stainless steel. And beyond its sheer mass, it is an object structurally integrated into the home.
It's literally part of the house.
Exactly. It's connected to municipal water lines, it's sealed with caulk, it's bound by PVC piping.
You would need an active demolition permit just to remove it from the premises, let alone get it past a TSA checkpoint.
Right. And that is the exact mechanism of the humor. The idiom deliberately uses the absolute zenith of an unmovable, burdensome domestic object to highlight the absurd, excessive nature of the luggage.
It's the most ridiculous thing you could possibly try to bring.
Yeah. By stating that the traveler packed everything except this deeply integrated piece of plumbing, the language exposes the psychological state of the packer.
Which is just sheer panic.
Pretty much. They have long since abandoned packing based on the actual climate or itinerary of their destination. They are packing in a state of anticipatory panic, trying to construct this mobile fortress against any conceivable inconvenience.
The overpacker is trying to neutralize the vulnerability of travel by bringing their entire domestic ecosystem with them. I totally get it. But let's flip the spectrum entirely.
Okay, the anti-planner.
Yes. Let's look at the traveler who views that kind of meticulous preparation as a prison sentence. The curriculum introduces the person who operates on total spontaneity.
Which comes with his own set of problems.
Big time. They describe this mindset with the idiom to fly by the seat of your pants, or the slightly more modern shorthand, which is just winging it.
Right, winging it.
And the example the source provides is wild. It's someone who arrives at a foreign airport without a single hotel reservation. No guided tour bookings, no itinerary.
Just showing up.
Yeah, they just rent a car and plan to navigate purely on instinct.
It represents a highly romanticized, almost cinematic view of global movement.
Oh, totally. It's the pursuit of ultimate unburdened freedom.
It is. But to really understand the weight of the phrase, flying by the seat of your pants, we have to dive into the history of aviation, specifically back in the 1920s and 30s.
Oh, right. Before the era of glass cockpits, GPS, and automated altitude warnings.
Long before any of that, early aviators operated in a state of profound sensory exposure. They did not have formal navigation instruments to measure their pitch, yaw, or altitude in low visibility.
So what did they do when they flew into a cloud?
Well, when they flew into a cloud bank or a storm, they were entirely cut off from visual references to the horizon. To prevent the aircraft from stalling or entering a fatal spin, these pilots had to rely purely on somatosensory feedback.
Meaning they had to feel it.
Yes, they had to feel the vibrations of the wooden airframe, listen to the pitch of the engine, and crucially, feel the shifts in gravitational pull and momentum pressing against their own bodies in the pilot's seat.
Oh, wow. So they were literally using the biological sensors in their own body, specifically the contact point with the seat of their pants as their primary flight instrument.
Exactly. They operated on raw, physical intuition out of absolute necessity. It was a matter of life and death, navigating an incredibly hostile environment using nothing but human nerve.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on how we apply this today.
Go for it.
Operating an early canvas and wood airplane without navigational instruments sounds like a prolonged, terrifying near-death experience. It wasn't fun. It was an act of extreme, desperate survival.
It certainly was.
So when a modern tourist cheerfully announces they are winging it to find a museum in Tokyo because they lost their map, aren't they basically adopting the swagger of an early aviator while ignoring the inherent danger?
That's a really sharp observation.
Right, because they aren't embarking on a breezy adventure. They're willfully flying blind into a complex, high-friction environment. They're essentially begging for a logistical disaster.
You're identifying the core irony of the idiom's modern usage. The language preserves the bravado of the 1920s pilot, but it completely strips away the context of mortal peril.
Yeah, it makes it sound cute when it's actually just reckless.
When you say you were flying by the seat of your pants on a European road trip, you're playfully framing your lack of preparation as an act of courage. You're leaning into the adrenaline of improvisation.
But that adrenaline runs out.
It does. That heavy reliance on adrenaline has physiological consequences. When you travel without an itinerary or a safety net, your brain remains in a heightened state of vigilance. You are constantly problem-solving on the fly.
Which must just fry your brain after a few days.
It rapidly depletes your cognitive reserves, yes.
And when your cognitive reserves are depleted, your perception of obstacles drastically shifts. A minor inconvenience suddenly feels insurmountable. Which brings us to the next phase of the deep dive.
The exact moment the journey stops going smoothly.
Exactly. That lack of preparation inevitably leads to the moment the elements turn against you. We all plan our trips hoping everything will go off without a hitch.
Which the curriculum defines as an event happening perfectly with zero problems.
But the reality, especially if you're flying blind, is almost always what the vocabulary describes as a bumpy ride.
A period filled with difficulties, stress, and obstacles.
Right. And the terminology here is so physical, it's deeply rooted in the mechanics of transportation.
Let's unpack the etymology of a hitch first. Its origins lie in physical friction. A hitch is actually a knot.
Oh, like tying a boat to a dock?
Similar, yeah. It's a knot used to temporarily secure a rope to an object, or it refers to a sudden, temporary stoppage in a pulling motion. Think of a horse-drawn wagon.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
If the harness operates smoothly, the wagon glides. If there is a hitch, if the rope catches or tangles, there is a sudden, jarring halt.
The physical momentum is violently interrupted.
Precisely. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the evolution of human movement from clearing dirt paths to laying down asphalt to establishing flight corridors has been this relentless pursuit of smoothness.
Because smoothness means speed and efficiency.
And safety. Friction, whether it is an unpaved road, atmospheric turbulence, or a slipping knot, represents danger and delay. So any disruption naturally becomes linguistic shorthand for stress.
Which is why a bumpy ride operates on two distinct levels.
Exactly.
The literal interpretation is the physical jolting of a rental car over a terrible mountain pass or a commercial airliner hitting a pocket of rough air.
But the curriculum provides a much more resonant, figurative example.
Yeah, they describe a traveler in Paris who experiences a whole cascade of failures. Their luggage is lost by the airline, followed immediately by a severe bout of food poisoning.
The worst-case scenario.
Truly. And they categorize that entire Parisian ordeal as a really bumpy ride. There is no literal physical shaping involved in food poisoning or a lost suitcase, but the language of vehicular friction is universally understood.
It translates perfectly because cognitive friction mimics physical turbulence in the brain.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, when you are standing at a luggage carousel watching empty space rotate past you, your cortisol levels spike. Your nervous system is jolted.
You feel it physically in your body.
You do. The smooth forward momentum of your planned itinerary hits a massive psychological pothole. You are forced to stop, reassess, and expend energy dealing with the obstruction.
Right, filling out the forms, calling the insurance company.
Exactly. The mental start and stop anxiety of navigating bureaucratic airline forms or lying in a hotel room feeling violently ill mirrors the exact exhaustion of riding in a carriage with broken suspension.
The psychological bruising is identical to the physical bruising.
It is a perfect metaphor.
But even during a bumpy ride, there is an implication of continued, albeit painful, forward movement. You are still in the car, or the plane is still in the air.
You're still making progress, however slowly.
Right. But the curriculum then transitions into significantly darker territory. It introduces the vocabulary of total paralyzing cessation, abandonment.
This is where we get into the idiom of being left high and dry.
Which is the transition from a difficult journey to a state of complete institutional abandonment.
And the scenario they outline in the source material is viscerally terrifying for anyone who travels frequently.
Oh, it gave me anxiety just reading it. It involves a massive systemic failure. An airline cancels a connecting flight at 2 a.m. All the customer service kiosks slam shut.
No hotel vouchers are issued.
No alternate routes are offered. You, the traveler, are simply abandoned in the cavernous, echoing halls of a major airport terminal, with no resources.
It's total isolation.
And alongside this, the curriculum introduces another phrase, missing the boat. Now, in this advanced C2 context, it's stripped of its literal cruise ship meaning.
Right. It's not about physically missing a ferry.
No, it's applied to the loss of a critical opportunity because you were too slow to act. Like agonizing over the price of a stunning ocean view villa rental for a day too long, only to find someone else booked it.
You hesitated, and the opportunity sailed away.
So what does this all mean? We have a really heavy concentration of nautical themes here. We have boats stuck on the sand and missed cruise ships.
The maritime analogy is crucial for understanding the depth of the helplessness involved.
It's wild, though. Being trapped in a modern, neon-lit, heavily industrialized airport terminal at 3 a.m., surrounded by closed fast food shutters, you genuinely feel like a 17th century sailor who has been shipwrecked on a desolate rock.
You are totally disconnected from civilization. Let's break down the terrifying imagery of being high and dry.
Please do.
A ship is an object designed with a singular purpose: to navigate water. Its entire structural integrity and utility rely on buoyancy.
It needs the ocean to function.
Right. So imagine a large vessel that has been driven onto a beach during an extreme high tide or a storm surge. The hull comes to rest on the sand. But eventually, the celestial mechanics of the moon pull the tide back out to sea.
The water recedes.
Yes. The environment completely changes, leaving the ship completely stranded. It is now elevated above the waterline, entirely exposed to the air. It is high, and it is dry.
And completely useless.
Exactly. At this exact moment, a multi-ton marvel of engineering is reduced to an inert, paralyzed structure. It cannot move, it cannot generate momentum, and crucially, it cannot save itself.
It's completely stuck until the environment decides to introduce water back into the equation.
This raises an important question about the psychology of the modern traveler. When you enter an international airport, you're willingly surrendering your autonomy to a massive, complex network.
You are handing over control.
You are. The airlines, the air traffic controllers, the baggage handlers, the security personnel, they constitute the water. They are the medium that facilitates your movement across the globe. You are the vessel relying on their buoyancy.
Wow. So when the screens flash red with cancellations and the staff clocks out for the night, the tide violently rolls out.
The water vanishes. You are left sitting on your meticulously packed suitcase, utterly immobilized. The sudden removal of that institutional support perfectly captures the feeling of being left high and dry.
You have money, you have a passport, you have ambition, but without the systemic infrastructure to move you, you are paralyzed.
You are trapped on the linoleum beach of Terminal B, completely at the mercy of forces far larger than yourself.
Waiting for the airline to slowly bring the tide back in. That is a staggering way to visualize the vulnerability of travel. You realize how paper-thin the illusion of independence truly is.
Well, it's quite humbling.
It is. But surviving the apathy of massive transportation networks is only one phase of the gauntlet. The curriculum brings us to the next, potentially more damaging phase.
Right, because once you arrive, the challenges change.
Exactly. Once you actually clear the airport, once the tide comes back in and deposits you at your destination, the local environment introduces a completely different kind of bumpy ride.
We move away from the passive failure of systems and into the active, intentional exploitation by other human beings.
The dark side of tourism, the exploitation of trust. This is where the friction shifts from logistical to deeply emotional.
The source material dives into the vocabulary of deception and scams here.
Yeah, it explores what it means to be taken for a ride. They define it as being deceived, scammed, or manipulated by someone you implicitly trusted.
And the archetypal example they use is instantly recognizable to anyone who has stepped outside an arrivals hall.
Oh, the predatory taxi driver?
Yes. They describe a scenario where a driver picks up a bewildered tourist, realizes the passenger has zero comprehension of the local geography, and deliberately drives in massive, convoluted circles.
Just to make the meter go up.
Exactly. They turn a 10-minute direct route into a 45-minute sprawling tour, resulting in a bill triple the normal price.
Here's where it gets really interesting, linguistically speaking. The double meaning of taken for a ride is brilliant.
It operates flawlessly on two parallel tracks.
Right. You are literally being taken for a ride in a car while figuratively being scammed out of your money. The physical action is the exact mechanism of the figurative scam.
It's a rare, perfectly symmetrical idiom. Historically, though, the phrase has much darker origins.
Oh, where does it come from?
It comes from 1920s American organized crime, where being taken for a ride implied a one-way trip resulting in execution.
Oh, wow. Like mafia hits.
Exactly. Over decades, the phrase softened in severity, transitioning from physical elimination to financial deception. But the emotional resonance of the phrase remains quite severe.
Because it feels so personal.
We have to analyze why falling victim to this specific scam generates such a profound sense of humiliation. Losing $30 extra on a cab fare will not bankrupt most international travelers, yet the anger it produces is disproportionate to the financial loss.
It feels like a deep violation. It makes you feel incredibly foolish.
Because it is a violation of the social contract that underpins all travel. When you arrive in a foreign city where you don't speak the language, understand the currency, or know the cardinal directions, you are forced into a state of hyperdependency.
You have to trust people. You have no choice.
Right. You must rely on the expertise and the ethics of the local population. When you enter a taxi, you are handing over your physical safety and your navigational agency to a stranger. You are extending an immense amount of trust.
You are broadcasting your vulnerability.
And the predatory driver recognizes that vulnerability and actively weaponizes it against you. Being taken for a ride stings because it forces you to confront your own gullibility and powerlessness.
You are outsmarted by someone utilizing your own disorientation against you.
It is the realization that your trust wasn't just misplaced, but actively exploited for minor financial gain.
And that betrayal of trust smoothly transitions into the next idiom the curriculum highlights, which deals with an even more blatant form of extortion.
The concept of daylight robbery.
Yes. Price is so outrageously high, it feels like a blatant crime. And the scenario they use to illustrate this is buying 2 basic, unexceptional cups of coffee at an airport kiosk and being charged $50.
An increasingly common reality in modern transit hubs, unfortunately.
It's the normalization of extreme price gouging. But the phrase daylight robbery carries such a specific visual weight, it doesn't just mean something is expensive.
No, it speaks to the mechanics and the audacity of the crime. Let's trace this back to its linguistic roots. The phrase highway robbery, which operates on the exact same principles as daylight robbery, originated in the 17th century.
Referring to bandits?
Yes, bandits and footpads who would hold up stagecoaches on public roads. Now, the defining characteristic of a traditional robbery or burglary is stealth.
Right, like a cat burglar in the night.
Exactly. A thief breaks into a home under the cover of darkness, utilizing the shadows to obscure their identity and avoid a confrontation. The goal is to separate the victim from their property without being detected.
It's a crime of opportunity and concealment.
So to commit a robbery in broad daylight requires a terrifying level of confidence. It means the perpetrator is operating out in the open, fully visible, looking the victim directly in the eyes while taking their property.
They are not hiding because they know they don't have to hide.
They know the victim has zero leverage to stop them. We see this play out constantly through the behavioral economics of captive audiences, particularly in airports or heavily guarded tourist traps.
You're completely trapped.
When you are standing at an airport gate, you have surrendered your alternatives. You cannot leave the secure zone to find a reasonably priced cafe. You cannot bring liquids through security. You are physiologically tired and thirsty.
So the vendor charging $50 for coffee is engaging in daylight robbery because they possess an absolute monopoly over your immediate needs.
Yes, they are looking you in the eye and demanding an extortionate sum. And the psychological weight of the idiom highlights the sheer brazenness of the act. You are being openly robbed, and you are willingly handing over your credit card because the environment leaves you no other choice.
It is the ultimate expression of power dynamics. Whether you are trapped by the airline leaving you high and dry or trapped by the vendor committing daylight robbery, the prevailing theme of a travel disaster is the complete evaporation of your control.
You are bouncing from one exploitative, chaotic environment to the next.
But this grueling endurance test cannot last indefinitely. Every trip, no matter how catastrophic, eventually bends back toward its origin point.
The finish line.
Exactly. After enduring the physical exhaustion of a bumpy ride and the financial drain of daylight robbery, every traveler eventually reaches that finish line. The curriculum closes with the ultimate resolution of the journey: the return.
The conclusion of the narrative arc, where the chaos is finally neutralized.
The source material focuses on the proverb of comfort, uttered by almost every exhausted traveler the moment they cross their own threshold. They unlock the front door, drag their battered luggage inside, drop the keys on the counter, and sigh, "There's no place like home."
A phrase that has achieved a level of cultural saturation that is almost unmatched in modern English.
It's universal at this point.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the curriculum astutely points out that this proverb became globally famous thanks to the 1939 cinematic milestone, The Wizard of Oz.
Which is such a brilliant connection to make.
If we analyze the narrative structure of that story, it serves as the definitive allegory for a catastrophic travel experience.
Oh, absolutely. The protagonist is literally swept out of her home by an extreme weather event, which is the definition of an involuntary, very bumpy ride.
She is violently displaced from her predictable, sepia-toned reality and dropped into a hyper-saturated, deeply disorienting foreign land.
A land where she doesn't know the rules.
Throughout her journey, she faces hostile locals, deceptive authority figures, and constant mortal peril. Her entire motivation from the moment she arrives in this technicolor landscape is purely to figure out the logistics of returning to her point of origin.
She spends the entire trip just trying to leave.
Exactly. So when she finally secures her method of transit, clicking the ruby slippers, and repeats the phrase, "There is no place like home," she's not just stating a geographical preference.
What is she stating?
She is articulating the profound cellular relief of returning to an environment where she possesses absolute mastery. Home is the space where you know the exact layout of the rooms in the dark.
You know where the light switches are.
It is where you speak the language, where the plumbing functions predictably, and where the social contracts are inherently trustworthy because you authored them. The phrase encapsulates the sudden, intoxicating evaporation of the cognitive load we discussed earlier.
The hypervigilance finally just turns off. You can finally breathe. But, analyzing this from a macro perspective, it forces a deeply ironic realization about the entire sociological construct of tourism.
The irony is very profound.
Right. I mean, we spend months agonizing over itineraries, saving massive amounts of money, and enduring the absolute misery of airports, all to escape the crushing monotony of our daily routines. We flee our homes to find adventure.
We willingly submit to the stress.
Yes. Yet, consistently, the most euphoric, emotionally resonant moment of the entire vacation is the precise second it ends. So what does this all mean? Do we only leave home just so we can appreciate coming back? The pinnacle of the trip is walking back into the exact same mundane house we were so desperate to leave.
It really speaks to the hidden utility of the travel disaster. You cannot accurately measure the comfort of a baseline environment without experiencing extreme deviation from it.
Contrast is everything.
The mundane becomes magnificent only after it has been contrasted with the chaotic. You cannot appreciate the quiet reliability of your own kitchen sink until you've been left high and dry on a different continent.
That is so true.
The stress of the bumpy ride recalibrates your sensory perception. It washes away the fatigue of routine and replaces it with a deep, profound gratitude for predictability and safety.
We submit ourselves to the chaos purely to remember how good the quiet actually is. And I think that perfectly synthesizes the value of the C2 vocabulary curriculum we've decoded today.
It's a very necessary set of tools.
It is. These vibrant idioms packing everything but the kitchen sink, flying by the seat of your pants, being taken for a ride, or surviving a bumpy ride, they are far more than just linguistic flashcards. They are psychological tools.
They allow us to process the terrifying loss of control.
They allow us to transform terrible, stressful travel nightmares into compelling, humorous stories. They take the raw, disorganized trauma of a travel nightmare and refine it into a structured narrative of human resilience.
They allow us to frame ourselves not as victims of circumstance, but as seasoned survivors who have navigated the friction of the world and returned to tell the tale.
They give us the vocabulary to own our disasters. And as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to turn the conversation directly over to you, the listener.
Yes, time for some self-reflection.
Analyzing your own history of crossing borders and navigating transit, which extreme do you fall into? Are you the deeply anxious, chronic overpacker attempting to mitigate disaster by hauling the metaphorical kitchen sink across cobblestones?
Or are you the romantic who thrives on the adrenaline of flying by the seat of your pants?
Someone who willingly enters the high-stakes arena of the unknown without an itinerary. Regardless of your preparation strategy, it is highly probable you've experienced the jarring friction of a bumpy ride.
It's an inevitable part of moving across the globe.
Which leaves us with a fascinating, final, provocative thought to turn over in your mind. Linguists have long debated the idea that the specific words we have access to actively shape our perception of reality.
The idea that language dictates thought.
Right. So if that is true, does knowing these dramatic, historically rich idioms actually act as a shield during the moment of crisis? Imagine you are back in that fluorescent, echoing airport terminal at 2 a.m.
The board is blank.
The counters are closed and you are utterly stranded. Does the cognitive ability to label your panic, to look at your situation and think, I am experiencing a textbook bumpy ride and I have been left high and dry, somehow lessen the terror?
Does it make it easier to survive in the moment?
Exactly. Does possessing the language of the disaster allow you to realize in real time that the chaos surrounding you isn't a permanent tragedy, but simply the opening chapter of an incredibly entertaining story you were going to tell for the rest of your life?